Hi, and welcome to another episode of Industry Insiders. Today, we are joined by Mike Peterson, who is going to talk to us more about the intersection of design and science. And so, Mike, we are so excited to have you. Please share with us a little bit more about your journey. How did you develop science and design, and a little bit more about you as well?
Well, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. The story behind Science and Design, which is the company I founded, which is an educational and marketing platform that helps designers realize their ability to improve health. The story behind it is that I spent most of my career in the publishing business, working with Hearst magazines and more recently Lux magazine. And it was on a luncheon occasion in Denver, Colorado, back in 2015, that I met an architect. Now, I was there to sell him a page of advertising, and all he wanted to do was talk to me about how beauty improves health. His name is Don Ruggles, and he has gone on to write his own book called Beauty, Neuroscience, and Architecture. And during the conversation, Don was just profuse in his ability to talk about the academic aspect of how what science has been able to now measure is that beauty improves health. And I'm sitting there thinking at the luncheon table, wait a minute, if beauty improves health and designers create beauty, ergo, designers improve health. It was a revelation for me that actually led to me leaving the magazine business after a year. And I decided to spend the rest of my career helping designers realize their role as an alternative health resource, which is what science thinks of the design industry.
So it sounds like you were very passionate, and you knew from a very early stage that you wanted to make that transition over and support and be an advocate of this industry. So for those of us who are listening who are not familiar with the term neuroesthetics and that intersection, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, neuroesthetics is a word that has splintered off of the world of neuroscience. It turns out that for the last 30 years or so, neuroscientists have been studying the design and architecture business. They've been studying the role of beauty in our health. And so neuroaesthetics, if you break the word down, essentially neuro means the physiological in the brain, and aesthetics, of course, is beauty, nature, and fine design. You put the two portions together and you end up with neuroaesthetics. And I will tell you that it's a word that is now becoming common in the world of architecture and interior design. Because after all, we've been building over the last century, we've been building architecture that is relatively unhealthy for us. And neuroaesthetics is now proving the fact that we need beauty, we need detail, we need ornamentation, we need the idea of organized complexity as a brain in order to prosper. And so neuroaesthetics is the outgrowth of the world of neuroscience.
I see. Okay. So it's a segment of the under the umbrella of neuroscience. So when you said earlier that, in a sense, architecture has become unhealthy in certain ways, is it the specific building materials? I know that, VOCs are a common issue. So, what are some ways that we can, go in the right direction moving forward?
Well, when I say unhealthy, what I mean is that for the last 100 years, we've been building tall skyscrapers that lack detail. Remember, our brains are such that they're a perfect example of organized complexity. So we seek out detail and ornamentation as a human species. So when we build a plate glass tall window 200 stories high, it's boring. It's not attractive to the human mind. And so we'll pass it by because there's nothing to light up the brain cells. And so what's interesting is that we've been building cities now for the last 100 years that are fundamentally unhealthy and actually depressing to us. I say that not to be a downer. I say that to help designers realize the opportunity that exists for all of us. The opportunity to balance a world that we've developed that is not engaging, it's not enlightening, it's not lifting us up. And so designers have the opportunity now to do just that.
And that's really fascinating to know. Tell me a little bit more about that. So what does our brain like? I know you talked about a certain level of complexity and, maybe even some organization. So what does our brain gravitate towards naturally?
Well, the brain is an amazing organ in our body. It takes in 11 million bits of information every second, but only processes 45 to 50 of them. So as a human species, a lot of this comes out of our evolutionary inheritance. We are an animal species. It's funny because a million years ago, we lived with the rabbits and the deer and the plants and the trees. Today, we consider ourselves the evolved species, but today, the rabbits and the deer are still in their natural environment. We are not. We're surrounded by concrete and walls and ceilings and all things artificial. And so our brain is naturally seeking out things that are part of our evolutionary inheritance. Nature, soft curves, detail, textures that are all part of what we have been over the millions of years.
And I know that relates back to, it sounds like, biophilia and that, concept of connecting to nature and having our interiors be somewhat of a reflection or, a nice cohesive transition between the outdoors and what we're, in our built environment. So I'd love to know more about that, that intersection and biophilia and how it relates to neuroesthetics, if you have any insight you can share.
Yeah, biophilia is becoming the darling of the interior design industry. And the architectural industry as well. Biophilia, if you break the word down, and I realize it sounds like an odd word, biophilia, but break the word down, and bio means nature, philia means love of. So we're talking about love of nature. And it harkens back to what I was just saying, that we were born in nature. We are a natural human species of animal. And biophilic design is bringing biophilia into the home to satisfy the innate need that we have for nature. So it's an interesting phenomenon. Biophilia, a lot of people think that biophilic design is bringing a few plants into the house or into the space. It's not. Biophilia is a reminder of our evolutionary inheritance. For instance, you can go back a million years where we lived in a cave, safe and secure, in a refuge, a sanctuary, but we looked out the cave to see the prospect of what was out at the rest of the world. So we have a design element called prospect and refuge as a result of biophilic design. And today you see that in our homes when we have that nice little window seat where we curl up, sip our cup of coffee, and gaze out at the outside of what is out there in the rest of the world. It's just a perfect example of biophilic design being connected to our inheritance.
That makes complete sense. And of course, there's so much, there's an overload of research out there that supports how nature is good for us. It's good for us spiritually, mentally, psychologically. So, that's great to know.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, if I could just jump in for a minute, because the health benefits of biophilic design are numerous. It's one of the reasons that so many major corporations in the country and around the world are creating building headquarters that are 100% biophilic. Amazon, for instance, in Seattle has a headquarters with 390 different species of plant life. Apple's new headquarters in Cupertino, California, is 100% biophilic. Every workstation has access to natural sunlight and greenery. Etsy just changed their entire headquarters in Brooklyn, New York, to 100% biophilic. The workstations are literally hanging cocoons. So you sit in a cocoon with your laptop, safe and secure, much like the Prospect and Refuge. Microsoft is building conference rooms in treetops. Now, these companies are doing this because they know biophilic design increases creativity, productivity, and as a result, profitability. And that's why it started in the larger commercial world. but it is now seeping down into residential design as well. A couple of other examples of health benefits would be, there was a study done a couple of years ago by the Rusk Institute in New York, where they prescribed for 107 different patients time spent in a nursery, not just to walk through the nursery, but to literally put their hands in dirt and plant flowers. After 30 minutes of this exercise, there was a decrease in the heart rate of 5 beats per minute, a decrease in the usage of the heart by 6 to 7%, just because of planting flowers. In Japan, there's something called Shinrin-yoku. Now, that's a Japanese term. When translated, means forest bathing. So they experimented in the early 1990s. Doctors were sending patients out into the forest. The result was a decrease in the cortisol rate of about 12% and a decrease in the heart rate of 5 beats per minute just by spending time in the forest. Biophilia and biophilic design is the hottest new development in architecture and design in the industry today.
And so do you feel like it's been more of a recent transition, that people are being more cognizant, design professionals are being more cognizant? And do you think maybe it was just a matter of profitability, of using cheaper or more non-toxic materials in the past?
I'm not sure. I'm not so sure it's about non-toxic materials. I'm sure it's about the realization that there are health benefits associated with biophilic design. And they started in the early 1980s when doctors were realizing in a hospital outside of Philadelphia that some patients were recovering from surgery faster than others. And so they brought in a Dr. Roger Ulrich out of Texas A&M to do a study. And the result was that he learned that some patients had a view out the window of a brick wall. Other patients had a view out the window of a tree landscape. Lo and behold, those who had a view out the window of the tree landscape had a recovery time that was roughly 1 day shorter than those who had a view of the brick wall. So all of these things were happening at the same time, ultimately ending up with studying the idea of the value of nature.
So I know you mentioned the integration of biophilia started around 1980. Is that right?
Roughly, yes.
The modern day design professional or architect and designer, what are some elements that they can start incorporating right now to keep this growth towards biophilia, sustainable and continuous?
Well, there are a couple of details of biophilic design, which is part of neuroesthetics. And a couple of those details are things like a view out the window. It's very, very important because it follows the concept of prospect and refuge. Again, part of our evolutionary inheritance. An abundance of natural sunlight is also extremely important because that's where we grow up. Natural fire, running water, all of these are design elements that are encoded in our DNA and are necessary for a healthy environment at home.
You see, that's amazing to know that they're just the basic elements of nature can do wonders for us. As far as, any particular types of commercial spaces. So when we think about healthcare or hotel environments, I know you mentioned in the healthcare example, the patients who had that tree landscape view, they had a shorter recovery time by 1 day. So any other examples you can think of where neuroesthetics has proven especially beneficial in commercial spaces?
Oh, well, it's an industry that is really heating up today. I've already mentioned Apple's headquarters. I've already mentioned Amazon's headquarters and Microsoft. There's a hospital in Singapore called the Khoo Teck Puat Hospital. Khoo Teck Puat is interesting because it's 100% biophilic design. Every square foot, every square meter is designed to somehow bring nature into the environment. It's so successful a hospital today that if you're an architect or a designer ready to start drawing up a new hospital, you make a pilgrimage to the Khoo Teck Puat Hospital in Singapore because it is the standard for hospital design today. There's also an interesting facility in the United Kingdom called Maggie Center. It's a cancer research, it's a cancer locate center. And it is also 100% biophilic design. So you're seeing this happen all over the world today, that hospitals and commercial locations are being developed using biophilic design. So it really raises the question, if hospitals around the world are using biophilic design to improve the health of their patients, shouldn't we as designers be using biophilic design to improve the health of our patients?
And you also said a lot of professionals are gravitating towards or taking a pilgrimage to that hospital as the idyllic example of what hospitals should be like. So do you have any more insight on that? Like what specific elements of that hospital make it the gold standard, I guess?
Well, there's a lot of color contrast. There's a lot of open space. There's a lot of natural sunlight, and soft linear movements. Remember, there are no straight lines in nature. There are no right angles in nature. So good biophilic design is soft. It has movement to it. It's fluid. Think of the movement of a tree canopy, and the beauty of why we love looking up through a tree canopy to see the sunlight beyond it. That same kind of feeling is what biophilic design can give you in the interior when designed accordingly.
I see what you're saying. So following those natural patterns and movements that you find in nature.
Absolutely.
Talking more about the future. So as this field evolves, what future innovations in design and science are you most excited about? And of course, if there's any, direct relevance, again, I know we're talking a lot more about commercial spaces, but if you have any more insight to share on that, that would be great too.
Well, I think one of the interesting developments over the last 20 years or so is the realization that all of our conscious thoughts and actions are unconscious first. Now, let me say that again. All of our conscious thoughts and actions are unconscious first. 95% of our brain is devoted to the unconscious thought. So what that means, essentially, is that for the first 3 or 4 seconds of viewing some new image, our unconscious mind is in control. For instance, how many times have we looked at the front of a car? And instantaneously, without thinking about it, we've seen a face, the facial structure. It happens all the time. Now, what's amazing is that this is uncovering all kinds of different approaches to design. We have just a split second to grab attention of the unconscious mind. Now, think of how this applies to website design, how it applies to packaged goods in a supermarket, how it applies to walking up to the front of the building. Do we like the front of the building or not? So what's fascinating is that it begs the question, are we designing for this unconscious mind, also known as the subliminal brain? The subliminal brain is in control of 95% of our unconscious thoughts. It's an amazing development, and that we're just beginning to learn more about. The other thing that I think is interesting that science is just beginning to study is the role of sustainability as it relates to beauty. Now, there's a great book called The Shape of Green by Lance Hosey, where he talks about the relationship between sustainability and beauty. Now, one would think that they should be compatible, and they are. They're very compatible. But when it comes down to one trumping the other, is that true? Will one trump the other? And he comes down with the net summary of the fact that if it's not beautiful, it's not sustainable.
If it's not beautiful, it's not sustainable.
Think about this. Suppose you build a sofa, and the sofa is made out of all the right materials. It's green, it's highly sustainable, but it's ugly. Is it sustainable? And the answer is no.
Right. Because that piece won't last in that environment, or it won't function the way it needs to for that person.
Because we don't want to look at it.
Right, exactly.
Because it's not beautiful. It's not perceived to be attractive. And so that's where he comes down. It's an interesting conversation that is just beginning. When you go beyond with, if a product is made out of all of very, very, very right products, highly sustainable, is that enough? No, it's not enough. It has to be beautiful because beauty has sustained us over the millennia.
Right. And that goes back to, that proven point of neuroesthetics. The whole point of this is that, the way that our brain is affected when we view something that's beautiful. So a little bit more deeper into the science part of it. So what happens? Is there a boost of serotonin, dopamine? What happens?
Well, when we see beauty, we immediately get a burst of serotonin, and we also get a change in our skin cellular structure called GSR, galvanic skin response. So now I'm not the academic here, but this is what I've learned from the academics. And that is that, yes, we get a burst of serotonin, which is calming, makes us feel better. It lowers our heart rate, it lowers our blood pressure, and the GSR, the galvanic skin response, occurs. And so that's the physical reaction that science has now been able to study and quantify. That's what's interesting. For a long time, we've all known that a good design makes people, quote, feel better. Beauty and good design is more than emotional. It's actually physical because there is a physical reaction to beauty. And being physical, we can now measure it. That's how we know today that beauty improves health. It's documented and it's unchallengeable.
So beauty improves health. And then, of course, I know you mentioned the academic side is a bit different. And I know with the science and design certification, you have a whole team, of neuroscientists, physicians, well-being designers. So that was amazing to know as well. Wanting to talk a little bit about both. So first being, so when you say that, of course, our brain processes beauty, we like it, makes us physically feel better, and we have that physical reaction, it sounds like. What are our decision-making skills? I know our prefrontal cortex is responsible for decision-making. How do those two things relate, if there is a relation? Are we likely to make decisions that we find more beautiful or more appealing to the naked eye?
We run towards beauty. It's instinctive. It's intuitive. We don't have a choice. When we have a couple of images in front of us, we run towards the one that gives us the greatest pleasure. And that's that's part of our evolutionary inheritance. It's something that is encoded in our DNA, and we don't have a choice. Aesthetic experiences are a fundamental need. Susan McSalmon out of the Johns Hopkins University says aesthetic experiences are a fundamental need and are encoded in our DNA. And so we can't fight it. We can't ignore it. We just run towards beauty and pleasure.
Right. So it's instinctive. There's nothing we can do about it. It's how we're built.
That's exactly right. And that's what's so exciting about the design industry today, because we're actually creating something that our clients, our patients, if you will, have a fundamental need for. And so the opportunity to serve that need is exploding the opportunity for the interior design business, commercial and residential.
In the modern day era, we're surrounded by technology. Of course, there's the AI evolution that's happening right now. And in some ways, I feel like we're moving backwards because we're constantly on screens and we're putting ourselves in our built environments much more than we have in the past. So what are some ways, any insights that you have on that? How can we balance both of those things that are happening, that movement towards biophilia, the movement towards a healthy environment, but then also this uptick, in technology use and just constantly being on our screens?
Well, I think this is really personal then. I just make sure I find time to spend time in nature. I have favorite spots in my home, for instance, where I just go and I listen to the music, and I sit on my back deck and I listen to the birds chirping, and I watch the wildlife that's around my house. And I use biophilic design, the biophilia outside, but I use biophilic design inside. But you mentioned technology, and there's one other bit of technology I want to share with you, and that is this ties into the unconscious mind that I was just talking about. It's called VAS, Visual Attention Software. It's a new software from 3M, and it's software that has the ability to predict where the unconscious mind will be attracted. Now that's fascinating because they consider it a visual spell check, and you want to be sure that parts of your rendering are getting the attention they deserve. Then you run it through the VAST software, and you'll know where the unconscious mind will be attracted, remembering that you only have 3 or 4 seconds to grab the attention of that mind. It's heavily used in packaged goods today, because just think, you're walking down the chips aisle at a supermarket. Look at all the competition. I guarantee you, all of those packages have been run through the VAST software. VAST is also heavily used in website design. You have a split second in website viewing to stop the eyeballs on a particular page. So VAST has been used heavily for the last 15 years in those two industries. It is now becoming used in the world of interior design as well. So that's exciting to see VAST be playing a more important part in our industry today.
I'm so happy you shared that with me. I will absolutely look into that. So unconscious mind, it's taken over, whether we like it or whether we know it or not. So tell me more about any advice that you would give design professionals right now, designers or architects who are interested in exploring the concept of neuroesthetics, really incorporating it into their work. Where should they start?
Well, I think the first thing they should do is get the book Beauty, Neuroscience, and Architecture by Don Ruggles. Don does an excellent job in laying out all the things that we've been talking about. In a way, I'm kind of like an acolyte of Don's. He and I have become very good friends, and his book is it's a primer to the whole world of neuroaesthetics. I would go on and get also the book Cognitive Architecture by Anne Sussman. Anne's a little more academic, but she's absolutely brilliant. She's a professor of cognitive architecture at Boston Architectural College. Yeah. And she does a great job explaining a lot of what Don talks about, but in greater detail. Now, in terms of biophilia, there's a couple of good books. One by Terrapin Brightgreen called Nature Inside. Terrapin Brightgreen is a firm, I think, out of New York that has spent the last 30 years studying the benefits of biophilic design. There's another great book called Nature by Design by Stephen Keller. So those 4 books will be a great beginning for someone interested in this subject. Now, I will also say that we've developed a certification program as well. For the last several years, I've been doing a series of science and design summits around the country and in Canada. And the result of those summits is that designers have come back to me and said, Mike, you need to produce a certification program. I want to be certified in the science and design. And so just go to scienceanddesign.com and look up certification and take a look at the certification program, because you'll be joining hundreds of other designers that are now studying to be certified in the science and design.
Do you also have architects on that team as well?
Absolutely.
For the certification
Absolutely.
process? Okay. Well, those sound like some fantastic resources. So thank you for sharing that with our audience. And so we are actually coming to an end now. I'd love to know if there's anything specifically that you'd like to share, anything that we missed, or anything else you'd like to talk about.
No, I hope as a result of this, I hope everyone can get an idea of the value proposition that is in front of us as an industry. You said it earlier, Shivani, we don't just create pretty rooms. We do that, but today's value proposition is what science holds us to, and that is they think of us as an alternative health resource. We improve health, period. We need to own it. We need to have confidence in ourselves that we do, and we need to study and be educated in the fact that of all the things that we just talked about. So I do hope the audience appreciates this, but realizes the great future that we have as an industry, as an alternative health resource.
So it sounds like, to be an advocate, to be a resource, to be well-read, and really promote this concept, and to let other people know that we're doing more than, like we talked about, making rooms and spaces pretty. All right. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. It was great to talk with you and to learn so much about the intersection between science and design and neuroaesthetics. And thank you, everyone at home, for joining us here on Industry Insiders. Until our next episode, thank you.
Thank you, Shabani.